Hey, my name is Pete Tipler. I am the Renewables Director at Exodus Group. Wanted to make this video today to talk about the energy transition. We are seeing many companies around the world and many politicians and communities talking about the energy transition, and we're seeing many different industrial approaches to tackling that energy transition for their businesses. So really wanted to talk about how Exodus is looking at the energy transition as well, and what we're doing from the perspective of people, geographies, our capability. So I'm pleased to say here today joined with Steve Swindell, who is the Managing Director of Exodus. So Steve, how about we start with people?
Yep.
We've been doing a lot of recruitment this year, and we're planning a lot of recruitment next year. How do you see changes in those recruitment reflecting the energy transition?
Yeah, good question, Pete. We have been doing a lot of recruitment this year. We've recruited over 60 people into our business this year, but the most exciting part of it is 25 of those have been young engineers and young scientists scientists and engineers. And what we're seeing is that they have a completely different approach to energy, or a different view of energy, and not the traditional oil and gas mentality. So I think bringing those young people into the business is one of the first steps we're going to see in how we approach this energy transition. Because whilst they're joining Exodus to work in oil and gas, they're also joining it to work in the renewable sector as well. So I think that's going to be one of the fundamental changes, going to force us all to change our attitudes.
Absolutely, that sounds good. I think with the creation of our new renewables division starting in January, we are providing the backbone and the resource and the ability to offer those opportunities to all of the people that we're recruiting right now.
Yep.
We've also started looking at innovation, and you mentioned that these young graduates are coming in with different views on things like sustainable energy solutions and the part that renewables has to play. We've been investing a lot in innovation, making sure that that culture of innovation is being reinforced. Do you see that as playing a part in the energy transition as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. We've actually invested in an innovation manager for the first time ever in Exodus, so that's an exciting thing for us next year. But yeah, part of the reason behind that is because we have to not just innovate for our clients. We actually have to innovate the way we deliver our solutions to our clients, and that's why I'm so passionate about innovation. And part of that is comes right back to the energy transition. We have to be selling ourselves as energy consultants, which is not the same as selling ourselves as oil and gas consultants anymore. So we definitely need that innovative thinking in how we change our approach as consultants.
Yeah, I think that really strikes a chord with me. Just this morning, a colleague sent an email about an open call for innovation that Google has. And we're seeing that the energy transition has this. It's not just about the structural energy system, it's also about how people access energy, how people use energy, the global electrification we're seeing, and also how society embraces with energy and embraces with data and information and knowledge. So what Google is looking for is innovations around how AI or machine learning can contribute to social impact, and that relates a lot to energy and how people behave. I really hope that the innovation team can start to look at that in the new year. Okay, so we've been recruiting quite a lot in the UK. How do you see the geographical spread of what we're doing changing in 2019 or beyond? Do you see us adapting our approaches regarding where the energy transition is going, and how do you see all that all fitting together?
I think we as Exodus, we see ourselves as having to become an international consultancy first and foremost. So I think we definitely are not focusing on the UK solely. We want our objective is to become a world-leading consultancy, and I think that applies to how we look at the energy transition as well. So I don't want to restrict ourselves to certain parts of the world. I think we need to be open to all areas. And now the question is, where are the best opportunities to go to? Now, for example, Japan might be a topical one. Is Japan an area that's of interest these days?
Yeah, it is. I mean, from my perspective, Japan's just announced that they're going to have an offshore wind leasing round in 2019. There's been a lot of a lot of pilot projects and smaller test projects out in Japan, and they're really looking at floating wind. So we're starting to see floating wind now a bit more in the UK, and of course Exodus was involved in planning and achieving approval for the Highwind floating wind farm, which is the first commercial floating wind farm of its kind in the world. But we're seeing that in Japan now that things are accelerating there pretty fast. But the other thing that's interesting is, on the one hand, you've got the commercial scale offshore energy projects, offshore Japan, offshore Taiwan, South Korea. But you've also got large numbers of communities who are currently reliant only on diesel generation. And it's funny because it's going to be a slow process, but more and more the utility companies or the providers of that power for those communities are looking towards how renewable energy can combine with that diesel generation. How can it offset their emissions? How can it increase the affordability and access to that energy? How can it be more consistent in the supply of energy? So we see remote communities and remote islands in Japan, Southeast Asia in particular, but perhaps all around the world. I think we're starting to see perhaps a move from this big economy where you just look at the large scale projects and where the resource happens to be, whether it's hydrocarbon resource or wind or tidal, to looking at perhaps much smaller isolated markets as well, where we can try and find solutions that are still valuable, still have a value chain, but perhaps it isn't about always being the route to market being via grid, or the route to market being via transport to an oil terminal or something like that. So we're seeing changes there.
Yeah, that's a challenge for us in terms of capabilities, don't you think? Because our entry into this market has come from our expertise in offshore. We're very good at putting things in water, and a lot of these things you're talking about are potentially land-based communities. So how are we going to address that as Exodus? Are we going to say we're now going to get into solar, or are we really still focusing on marine?
It's an interesting question, and I think there is an element of solar being a good solution around the world, but we've also got massive population growth everywhere, and what that means is that communities, governments, politicians are looking for energy solutions which deliver the energy they need, but perhaps don't interfere perhaps with their other sources of economy, whether it's it could be tourism. So they could be trying to find solutions which are offshore, further offshore in deeper water, and that's where we see things like the floating wind really playing into it. So our capabilities are really well suited to finding solutions that work for that. We've also got a lot of capability, of course, in the transition from the marine environment into the coastal, the onshore communities. So how do you the environmental implications there, the geotechnical implications there, how cables come to shore, or how you have near-shore projects, is a real core part of our capability for the last however many years in oil and gas as well. So I think it's really, really suited, and I don't see that changing for any time to come, to be honest.
That's good.
Where I see the capability perhaps being broadened is around the need for this consistency of supply of energy. And there are lots of potential solutions out there. We have the likes of Tesla with their big battery farm in Western Australia to supply the consistent baseload power to the communities in the grid. We see there's a big onshore wind farm in Japan which needs a 400 megawatts battery farm to be constructed alongside it. Now these are early stage projects. They're very early. They're still being designed, and that technology is still being proven in terms of how it can really be used to provide that affordable, sustainable power that people are looking for. But we've got to try and take some of our capability and work out how we can look at battery storage, how we can look at hydrogen, and the hydrogen supply chain around the world is an entirely massive beast on its own. So how do we kind of grapple with that? And of course we have the advisory angle as well. So we're not just talking about science and technology, engineering and maths, we're talking about strategic routes to creating these solutions. We're talking about how to finance them, how to make them bankable, how to make them investable and insurable. And that ability to do technical due diligence, technical advisory support, I think is going to really stand us in good stead.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's interesting. I think it fits well with Exodus's fundamental reason for being, if you like, is we like to solve clients' problems. And what we're saying is there's problems and we want to solve them. The problem statement is now changing. The problem statement is more about how you provide the energy and not how to develop an oil field or how to develop a wind farm. We don't necessarily have to do the engineering for this, but we have enough expertise to be able to help solve the problem. So that suits me, because that's the reason why we're consultants, is we like to solve problems, and it's just it's the new problem the world's facing. So I think we're in good shape.
Yep, I think so too. Okay, so I think we can talk about this for hours. It's such a massive topic, and there's so many different angles to what's happening around the world. Steve's talking about the problem statements changing. I think also the clients are changing as well. And we will still continue to have all of our oil and gas clients, and we know that some of them, many of them, are looking at how they can bring things like renewables into their own businesses. But we're also talking about clients such as governments, such as utility companies, communities as well. So I guess what I want to say is, if any of this strikes a chord with you, please do get in touch. It's a subject close to my heart, and I think we're really working very hard to be able to tackle any problems that exist head on. I think we're well suited to it. So please get in touch.